last week we talked about purity, and that purity is the guard of your eternal happiness, and actually has a lot to do with your happiness in this life, because it helps to preserve your faith. And just as purity is the guard of your eternal happiness, modesty is the guard of purity. Now, when we talk about modesty, right away people immediately jump to the idea that modesty has nothing to do except the length of a girl's skirt or her neckline. I'm sorry, that definition is a little bit too narrow. And therefore, they also seem to imply that it only applies to girls. No. Modesty, as St. Paul said one time, he said, let all give proof to all of your modesty. What did he mean? A better translation would be, give proof to all of your courtesy. Modesty, the true definition of modesty is, modesty means that a person's whole exterior conduct is becoming to the highest ideal of what a person should be. All of your exterior conduct, not just how you dress, but how you act, your posture, your speech, everything is in accord with the highest ideal, the best of what you as a person should be. Now that's going to change depending upon the person, because it has to take into itself where you stand in society, how you relate to other people. For example, the modesty of a nun, it would be different than the modesty of a college girl. And the modesty of a college girl would be different than the modesty of a bank president. A bank president, it's perfectly appropriate for a bank president to smoke a cigar. A college girl smoking a cigar would be a little bit bizarre, but it's not inappropriate for a college girl to smoke a cigarette. It would be unbecoming for a nun to smoke a cigarette. So you see, it changes according to your estate, for your position in life. And if you look at these things, aren't these kind of like the rules of etiquette? Yes, they are. Modesty existed long before etiquette did, but the world out there, the pagan world, took those rules that govern us for modesty and made them into rules of etiquette. All good manners is based on virtue. And the virtue that it's based on is modesty. Modesty is actually made up of 3 different virtues. Temperance, honesty, and humility are what govern true modesty. Temperance, as we've talked about before, is a balance. No extreme is good. And temperance is a balance between one extreme and another. So if you go too far in one extreme, a girl smoking a cigar would be one extreme, or a nun smoking a cigar would be an extreme. So if you go too far in one extreme or another, it's not temperate. Honesty, because we need to represent ourselves to the world as we are, what we are, no more, no less, exactly as we are, or as we should be. So the college girl wants to represent herself as a college girl, not as a bank president or a nun, one extreme or the other. She needs to represent herself as the highest ideal of what a college girl should be, or a college boy. These rules apply to guys too. So modesty demands temperance, the balance, but it also, with humility, wants us to show ourselves without hypocrisy. No dissembling. This is what you are, and this is what you represent. And then, again, that's honesty. Remember, humility is truth. So honesty is involved here too. You're not basing your life on a lie. You're not a hypocrite. So modesty, therefore, forbids acting as though one's glory was in this world. That would be vainglory or pride, again, against humility. And on the other hand, paying too little attention to the way one's dressed is just as blameworthy. Again, it's that balance between one and the other. As in all virtues, right action lies in the mean, not the balance. Modesty lies not in acting as if one was better than one is, making you a snob, or that one is less than what one is, making oneself a hypocrite. But in the balance, what you are, what you really are, acting the way you should act for the position that you have in society. Essentially, modesty applies to not just how we dress, but as I said, how you act and how you speak, everything about you. And it used to be that mothers used to teach their children how to act and how to behave, how to be a lady or a gentleman. If you act like a lady or a gentleman, you are acting modestly. Unfortunately, in the pagan world today, mothers are too busy with their careers to teach their children anything. And children grow up like Topsy, they just grow. Nobody teaches them. And so they don't know how to act. And so you have people yelling at somebody on their cell phone in the middle of Walmart, calling them all kinds of names. This is not modest behavior. But they don't know any different because nobody ever taught them. So, again, the first thing when you talk about modesty, the first thing that jumps into everybody's mind is how you dress. So let's look at how modesty applies to how you dress. Clothing, of course, is the primary means that modesty uses to protect purity. And purity can be violated by dress in two different ways: by exposure and improper emphasis. Exposure is exactly what it says. When you expose certain parts of your body that should be kept private because they do arouse certain sexual passions, you expose them to public view. Improper emphasis means you clothe those parts of the body, but you clothe them in such a way that you draw people's attention to them. Yes, they are covered, but it leaves nothing to the imagination. So, and if you do this deliberately, it would be a mortal sin. Now, most girls, and we'll start with the girls, what I say applies to boys too, but most girls do not dress, guys, wake up, most girls do not dress to get a guy's attention. Girls dress to please themselves and other women, not you guys. A woman dresses to please herself. She dresses by what she thinks looks good on herself and what everybody else is wearing, all the other women. The girl who does dress to please the guys, she's the one who usually dresses immodestly. That's not to say that the girl who's dressing to please herself or other women is not dressing immodestly, but she's not doing it deliberately. Therefore, she's probably not committing a mortal sin, but she may be committing a venial sin. Because even again, she's not doing it deliberately, but that doesn't mean that guys looking at her are not committing sin. And therefore, she is tempting them, and she is giving them, she's more or less participating in their sin. So, how do you know what is modest in your dress? How do you know when you're dressing modestly? Well, again, there are a few guidelines, but the guidelines are not hard and fast, and I'll give you a better guideline. Most of the guidelines that you learn in school are, if a girl kneels on the floor, upright, and her skirt touches the floor, doesn't have to lay on the floor. It would be better if it does lay an inch or so on the floor, because then you know your knees are covered. But if you kneel on the floor and your skirt touches the floor, the length of your skirt is correct. If you put your hand at your neck, now there used to be you put your finger in the hole, but I've known from the boarding girls that I had in the house, they have all totally different ideas about where the end of the bottom of their neck is. The easiest way is put your hand there, and if your neckline is below your hand, your neckline is too low. But I'll give you a better way to judge whether your clothing is modest or not. And it goes for the guys too, because guys do wear immodest clothing. Girls should ask their fathers, and boys should ask their mothers if what they're wearing is appropriate. Now, why do I say that? Because girls, you have no idea what you're wearing affects a guy. Because guys and girls are totally different in the way they think. What a girl is looking at in the mirror, again, she's judging what the other women are wearing, which looks good on her, but she has no idea what she's wearing, how that is going to affect a male. But if she asks a male, for example, her father, he can tell her, your skirt is a little too tight. Your blouse is a little too tight. Whatever. Your parents, because they are honest and they love you, will tell you. I remember a father bringing his daughter to the boarding house after Christmas vacation. She was wearing a really tight, short skirt. And he said to me as he's, bringing her luggage in and putting it down there, he said, "Sister, you should talk to her about her skirt." And I said, "Me? You're her father. You should be talking to her about her skirt." The same, guys, you need to ask your mothers. If your father or your mother comes up to you and says, "I don't think you should be wearing that," pay attention. They're not saying it because they don't like the color. And if you have no parents, and I don't know, maybe everybody here who doesn't have parents, but if you don't have parents, then find somebody else who loves you, who will give you an honest opinion. Your godparents, your aunts, uncles, grandparents, adopted parents, whoever. Ask them. They will tell you. So, again, skin and its adornments are also part of attire. So this includes things like jewelry, tattoos, piercings, and makeup. Again, you have to think of the mean, no excess. Is there anything uglier than seeing somebody who's totally covered with tattoos? But maybe one small tattoo on, your shoulder or the calf of your leg, whatever. Again, temperance. Pierced earrings, there's no problem with that. But if you have piercings all through your ears and your nose and your tongue, aren't you being a little excessive? All right, so jewelry, too much jewelry is, you see people with rings on every single finger, and sometimes 2 or 3 rings on every single finger. That's being excessive. There's nothing wrong, in makeup, there's nothing wrong with a certain amount. First of all, remember that your body is the body that God gave you. He gave it to you for a reason. He loves you that way. Can you improve on what God gives you? No. So makeup, jewelry, tattoos, whatever, is meant, if you use it at all, it should be to enhance what God gives you, but not to mar it or change it. To use so much of it that becomes something other than what it was. So if you're using too much makeup that makes you look like like a vampire or something totally different than the way God made you, you're using too much. That's excessive, and why are you doing it? There's nothing wrong with using makeup, a little bit of makeup to enhance, your eyes, yes, you maybe use some eyeliner or, mascara or whatever, but do you need to paint with an inch thick mask of makeup all over your face? Do you have to make your eyes look as, with eyeshadow that's got glitter and all kinds of other stuff in it? Do you really need that? Women who are married, there's nothing wrong with them coloring their hair, making it a different color, darker, to cover up the gray, because they have to please their husbands. If it helps their marriage to cover up the wrinkles and to cover up the gray, and same with the men. Men, God, by the way, do cover their gray. There's nothing wrong with that. It's to help their marriage. So first of all, look at the reasons why you're doing it, and then look at how excessive are you being with it. By using such adornments to excess beyond what's necessary to show respect for one's company and one's station, again, if you're going out to a dance or a business meeting or a fundraiser or whatever, you need to dress appropriately for that situation. And all the other women and men are going to be dressed in a particular way. You need to dress that way. You need to wear the appropriate jewelry, makeup, whatever. Again, but not to excess. A Catholic defeats the very purposes by using excess, by seeking to improve what cannot be improved. Your body can't be improved. God made you the way you are for a reason. He loves you that way, not some other way. And by doing so, you degrade what should not be degraded. And again, you're not being honest. You're being a hypocrite. You're showing the world a different person than who you really are. You're lying to the world. You're also lying to yourself. There are 3 primary ways where you need to be modest in your bearing, that is, in your actions. First is also how you walk, your posture. It is possible to walk in such a way that you draw attention to certain parts of your body. You need to be careful about that. The second way is speech. How do you talk? You need to understand it's Are you when we talk about speech, we don't mean just the words that you use. Of course you shouldn't be using vulgar words. There's nothing so inappropriate as listening to somebody who's using all kinds of four-letter words in every single sentence. But it's not just the words that you use, it's also how you speak. Are you screaming? Are you yelling? It's amazing to me that the people who cannot seem to carry on a conversation without screaming, at the top of their voice. And in public, over a cell phone. Also, you need to think about when to speak. Should you be speaking at all? There are times to be silent. There are times when it's only appropriate to be silent. And church is such a place. If you go to any Novus Ordo church after Mass, they're carrying on in church as if it was a community hall. You have the Blessed Sacrament here. You should be silent in church. There are also other times when you should be silent. The world out there hates silence. Why? Because when you're silent, you have to think. And the world doesn't want you to think. The devil doesn't want you to think. They just want you to follow, the crowd. If you're thinking, you might think of something that you might think that what you're doing is wrong. So they don't want you to think. The government knows that if they give you too much time to think, you might plot a rebellion. You might actually understand that what they're trying to shove down your throat is not right. They don't want you to think about it. So they bombard you constantly with all kinds of things. And the third thing that Catholics need to also think about is what we call modesty of the eyes. That it means that you need to, you can't really control all the time what you see, but you need to, as much as you can. The world out there is, you're going to see things on the television, on billboards, people walking down the street. You might be at a party or a meeting and be introduced to someone and the person is wearing something that's totally inappropriate. What are you going to do? This is called custody of the eyes or modesty of the eyes. It doesn't mean that you have to go around with your eyes cast down all the time. But when you do, like, for example, meet somebody in a business meeting, instead of looking directly at them, look past them, look past their head at something else. Control where your eyes go. Yes, you need to speak to this person, but you don't want to look at their neckline. So you look past them. You control where your eyes are. If possible, you look the other way. You look at something else. Doesn't mean walking around with your eyes down, but when you do see something appropriate, you look another direction. If it's anything that would threaten purity. Now, there are certain problem areas or areas that come up with young people that probably need to be addressed here. And so I'm going to go over them, much as I dislike doing this. First of all, one of the things that came up most of the time with the boarding girls was, is dating wrong? And why can't I date? My parents won't let me. What used to be known as keeping company. Dating is only appropriate for people who are getting ready, who are old enough, getting ready to be married, It's a prelude to marriage. So if you're too young to be married, you're too young to date. And I know the pagan world out there, they're starting in like the 3rd grade. So if you're not even considering marriage at this point in time, you shouldn't be dating. Who decides when you're old enough to date? That you're ready to date? Who decides when you're ready, you're mature enough to date? Your parents. Because your parents have a better idea of your maturity level, not you. By the way, people mature at different rates. And guys, girls mature faster than boys do. That's why girls and boys the same age shouldn't be dating. Because the girl's much more mature than the guy is. And I know guys who never mature. I know guys who don't mature until they're maybe 30 years old. If then. So, and that's why guys and girls who date each other often break up, because the girl realizes the guy isn't her maturity level, or the guy begins to mature and now he realizes he's now becoming more mature than she is, and he's looking for something different. Someone who's more mature, who's more on his level. That's why it's better to wait until you're fully mature, which does not happen until your late 20s. Girls, it happens a little earlier 20s, but it doesn't happen as teenagers, generally. Now, that's a general statement. Maturity involves a sense of responsibility. And some children even mature very quickly, because in their household, maybe because of the lack of a parent, different problems in the family, illness, whatever, they've had to mature. They've had to take responsibilities. Maturity involves you being willing to accept responsibilities and fulfill them. So that's why some guys don't mature until they're out of school and have jobs and actually begin to have responsibilities. Socializing that leads to sin, of course, is forbidden. If on these dates you're invited to go somewhere that would be sinful, no, you can't do that. All right, the next question that always comes up is kissing. In this civilized world that we live in a civilized world, kissing is a sign. It represents something. It's a sign of love between people. Parents kiss their children, children kiss their parents, their aunts, their uncles, so on, their friends. It's a sign, the exchange of the kiss is a sign of love. And it should be only exchanged between people who are bound together in love. Kissing should not ever be exchanged as some kind of gratuitous hello or goodbye. Or, God forbid, as a payment to a guy for his buying dinner for a girl. The second thing you need to know about a kiss is that love on its physical side is a process. It's a series of steps that culminate in that culminates in an act of physical union. The process begins with the kiss. And as with any process, it's the nature of a process to proceed, to go toward its natural ending. And every step in that process begins with what comes before it and is a prelude and a step toward the next step in the series. Lots of times, a girl or a boy only want the beginning of the process. They only want the kiss, but you can't usually always end with that. It is a process, and that the nature of a process is to proceed. And so lots of times a girl or a boy ends up in a situation that they don't like, that ends up being a sin, when all they actually wanted was the kiss. And they didn't stop there. So you need to be careful about even starting it. There is no moral evil in a brief and affectionate and uncomplicated kiss. But let it be repeated or protracted, goes on for a longer length of time than is usually necessary, then the sign becomes the prelude and the beginning of the process. And temptation has begun, and serious sin is at hand. Drinking. I know that most of you are probably too young to drink. I'm sure that doesn't stop you. There are, live in Louisiana, and the French, like their wine. And there's nothing wrong within the confines of your family. It's the government that won't let you do it in public. There's nothing wrong within the confines of your family drinking, a certain amount of wine on certain special. I know my family always had at Christmas and New Year's, whatever. We were, even as children, we were allowed, a certain small glass of it. And so that's not what I'm talking about. There's nothing wrong with drinking itself. Again, temperance. To excess is wrong. And I'm totally disapprove of children not being exposed to alcohol, because when and guided by their parents as to the use of it, because when the child is away from their parents, they go to St. Mary's or away to college, then they go the other direction because they don't know how to handle alcohol. They've never been exposed to it before, and they begin using it to excess. But the thing you really need to understand about drinking, as far as what moral purity is involved, is that drinking inhibits your will. It inhibits your willpower. And that it makes things, it makes that whole process kind of hazy, and your will is weakened, and you will do things under the influence of alcohol that you would not normally do, would never even think of doing without it. And that's why you have to be careful about it. And the same can be applied to drugs, because alcohol is a drug. You will do things under the influence of drugs or marijuana or anything else that you will not normally do without it. So that's where you have to be careful, because you will not be in complete control. You will not have complete control. Dancing. Dancing has always been a part of life. You have David dancing before the Ark of the Covenant. There's nothing wrong with dancing. Like anything else, it's fine, taken within the means. Temperance. Excess is what's wrong. So there's people like, the Puritan ethic that said all dancing is sinful. No, not all dancing is sinful. But there is some dancing that is sinful, the other extreme. It wasn't until, I'd say, maybe a little over 100 years ago that men and women danced together. By that I mean, men and women often danced together. But the most that they were touching each other was their hands. It wasn't until within the last 100 years or so that men and women started holding each other in their arms when they danced. Some of that kind of dancing can be sinful. So, certain unrestrained types of dancing can be sinful. Remember when the tango first came out, it was outlawed by the church because of the ways it was danced. Now, it can be danced appropriately. A group went to the Pope and showed him how, was danced. And he didn't have a problem with it. He didn't have a problem with the way it was danced before him. But you watch some men and women dancing it, you can see why there's a problem with it. So again, it's not the dance itself. The waltz, when it first came out, was considered totally inappropriate. Waltzing generally is not inappropriate, but it can be done in a way that is inappropriate. You have to be the judge of that. When it becomes unrestrained or very sexual or sensual, then it's becoming, you've crossed the line. But, English country dancing, in Syracuse, we used to have regular sessions with. I was a caller for the dancing. Square dancing, English country dancing, contra dancing. There's no problem with that. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of exercise. Because you are really jumping around and moving. It's not a slow waltz, sorry. It's not that way. Well, anybody who's done either square dancing or clogging, that's along the same lines. So, just to get back to it, modesty, as defined in the dictionary, is the state or quality or character of being modest. Modest disposition, freedom from boldness or forwardness, unobtrusiveness. 2, freedom from excess, exaggeration, or extravagance. Moderation, again, temperance. 3, decent reservation of propriety, of speech, delicacy of thought or purity of thought, character or conduct. Decorous. If you really look at that definition, it describes everybody knows one person like that. If you think of that definition, it's a beautiful definition of one person who gives an excellent example of modesty in speech, action, dress, behavior. Her name's Mary. She should be your model. And guys, look at our Lord or St. Joseph. How did they act or behave? If you use them as your model, you'll never have a problem. I will put on the website a PhD, a PDF called, it's called the Modesty Handbook by Donald Goodman. And he does an excellent job of explaining about modesty. And I took a few of his ideas here. Though I broke it down more into your level of, you know, he's probably a theologian or something. He can be a little bit, he's writing for other theologians. But any of you have any questions? Yes?
It's a question, but it's also my experience. I was raised in Mexico,
Uh-huh.
and I was told the way to sit, because I've noticed in the noble soldier, they will wear skirts, and they don't know to sit like a lady. Or they will bend, and I usually put my hand here in case, because even if your neck, this could go down.
Yes.
When you're signing something, so I always put my hand here, and then I sign to cover
Right.
my glass won't go down. And the sitting, and I was told that encouraged not to cross your legs when you're in church.
Yes.
Because the priest never crosses his leg.
Yes, and because the girls don't usually wear their skirts long enough to cover their knees, so when they do cross their legs, you can see right up their skirts.
And
yes.
Sit really like legs tight together, and I've never seen that dress. And that was something that I grew up, that you have to sit with your legs tight together, so.
Yeah, again, as I said, the modesty is not just in how you walk, but it also is in how you sit and how you act. Modesty covers every part of your how you look, how you act, how you speak. It's everything. I mean, you can go out there and get a book. There's plenty on the market. I really suggest Miss Manners as a book of etiquette. First of all, she's hilariously funny. It's enjoyable reading. It's not just a list of, well, you have to do this, you should do this, and she explains why you should do that, but she also does it in a way that can be very funny. However, the book is extremely thick. But you might just want to go through it and look at certain sections, like table manners. Again, it's everything about your life. Modesty is involved in everything because it's how we project ourselves to the world, how people see you, the example that you are giving to others. When they look at you, how, do they see a virtuous person? Or do they see a vulgar barbarian? Do they see an honest person? Do they see a person who's kind and generous? Or do they see a selfish brat? Again, it's all part of modesty. I really do suggest, I couldn't cover everything here. I really do suggest you go get a good book of etiquette. And that goes for guys as well as girls. You need to know how to act in any situation. How to be introduced to a person or how to introduce yourself to a person. What's the proper way to do it? Father wouldn't have to complain from the pulpit about disrespect. That's modesty. How you eat, how you work, how you look. Everything is part of it. So, if you really want to know more, get a book of etiquette. There's plenty of them out there. I've got, in my library, and you're welcome to borrow, I must have at least 6 or 7 different books of etiquette from periods beginning in the 1800s up to the present. Mostly because I wanted to see how first of all, because I am, again, a writer and a historian. Those were my majors in LSU. I graduated with degrees in creative writing and history. And I wanted to see the customs of how people acted, because when you're writing about them, especially historical people, you want to make sure that you're portraying them properly. So how did they act back then? So yeah, I have books of customs from all the if you read them, you'll find that the customs have not changed. Because what was modest then is still modest now. Yes, we no longer have, it used to be when you went to someone's house to visit, if they weren't home, you left your card. We don't do that anymore. Yes, gentlemen have business cards, and there's, times to, they will leave a card when they're visiting another business. Or, you introduce someone and you want them to contact you, you give them your business card. That's, people used to carry, that came from that custom of having cards. But it was there was much more to it back then. In fact, if the person was home and you expected them to call on you, you bent down one corner of the card. If they weren't home and you didn't want them to call on you, you bent down another corner of the card. It was ridiculous. But again, if you look at it, most of the customs then are still in practice today, because virtue hasn't changed. Modesty hasn't changed. Only certain exterior things have. We have cars now. We have to invent a whole new, all new kind of rules of etiquette for the road, for driving, for public transportation, because people back then had carriages or, rode horses. Things were different. And as we invent new things, now there's rules as to talking on the phone. I haven't seen, there's now coming out with new books of etiquette governing use of cell phones, because of people talking in public on cell phones, being in a restaurant and the phone rings. Do you answer it or not? Should you even have it turned on? Again, these are all covered by modesty. So yes, I suggest you get a book of etiquette. Actually, I've written a series of books of etiquette, starting with little girls, and then medium girls, and I'm on the high school level. I'm waiting for my sister, who's illustrating the first book. She's been doing this now for over a year, and hopefully she will finally finish the pictures, and then I'll actually put it out for publication. Fortunately, she only has to illustrate the first book. The second and third won't have pictures. But yeah, this, because I see the need for a Catholic version, and there are actually Catholic versions, etiquette books out there. But I hope soon mine will be out. But anyway, any other questions? Yes?
Another comment, my experience.
Sure.
I was facing my daughter, and she kept needing a friend in catechism. But she kept on telling her, "Oh, how tall you are," and I saw the young lady didn't like that. So I thought she would stop it, but I had to be like the mother. I didn't think that a mother had to teach that. So I had to teach her, well, you're not going to tell her how tall she is. You're just going to ask her what she did last week, or you're not going to mention that how tall you are, because I saw that. So to me, it was something that a mother has to teach. So
Mothers, as I mentioned, it used to be mothers did teach their children that, but in this day and age, with mothers having careers, children are not being taught. And so you'll have to learn it on your own if your mothers haven't taught you. I think most of you have mothers who have taught you, though. But if she missed anything, you can find it in a book of etiquette somewhere. So it's amazing, the rules that govern everything in society. But you don't need to know all those rules. You only need to know all the ones that pertain to you, your age, and your state in life. your situation. You know, you don't need to know the rules that govern a bank president. You don't even need to know the rules that govern a college girl if you're not in college yet. You just need to know the rules that govern a teenager, or a married woman, or a married man. Those are, and in that what situation? Because all the rules don't apply to you. The etiquette books write down all the rules, but you can just go through them and pick out the ones that apply to you. Any other questions? Yes?
Women is allowed to wear shorts.
Again, it depends on the situation, the appropriate, again, there's people totally against women wearing pants, but there's times when women need to wear pants. If you're riding a horse astride, you need to wear pants, sorry. If you're shingling a roof, you can wear this, or slugging through 3 feet of snow, pants would be a good thing to have. You could wear the skirt over it, but again, depending upon the situation, going through 3 feet of snow with pants and a skirt is very difficult. And being on a roof with a skirt can be very difficult, even if you have pants under it. But, so depending upon the situation, you need to dress appropriately for what is, and if the situation calls for wearing shorts, then how modest are the shorts? Are they skin tight? Are they very short? Short shorts? No, no short shorts. But, you know, in your own house, in your own yard, around your own pool. Again, look at the situation. What is appropriate for that? And what you wear will go according to that. If you're in public, then you have to dress totally differently than where you dress privately, or what you wear in your own home. And again, even if you are in your own home, and you have brothers or sisters, need to understand that what you wear outside of your bedroom is different than what you wear inside your bedroom. Because you do have members of the opposite sex in your home. You still have to dress appropriately with that in mind. I mean, we had a rule in the boarding house, the girls in their bedroom could wear, you know, pajamas or whatever they, you know, want, but if they left their bedroom, they had to put on a bathrobe, which they hated. They could not understand the reason why I insist, until they would come downstairs and find the plumber fixing the sink or something and say, you know, run back upstairs. Yeah. You never know who's going to be outside your bedroom when you leave it. You need to dress appropriately. Other questions? No. Just too scared to ask them. Okay, so we'll say prayers.